Can you tell our viewers, give us some examples of some of the extender or some of the amendments that you've been proposing for these extenders?
Sure, they're very important ones, and for me, and I've carried some of these on the floor, they're ones that came from people. The one that we've been doing every week would be one that, with federal stimulus money, bonded money, and other pools of money that are there, we are making amendments to make sure that money moves forward to those people who are doing road, bridge work, capital projects, or even now there's a question of a SUNY capital project out at Brockport University on their academic and event center that's slated to be built. These things, holding that money and not using that, really isn't smart. We're stopping jobs. We're not creating them. We're not using that money that came from somewhere else, if you will, to do the job that was intended to do. We even have some cases where road contractors are halfway through with the project. Now, because of this halt in funding, are letting people go who aren't getting paid, aren't working, and we're not completing the project in the summer construction season, if you will, which clearly, I think, in addition to all the economic impact, the proper governing and budgeting impact, we're also even adding to the lack of, if you will, public safety. Now, we put a bill forward that said, let's let these monies go forward, amend the governor's extender bill to include that. And ironically, while almost all of my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle say, you're right, we ought to be doing that, when the amendment hits the floor, it's politics, not pragmatism, and these amendments are voted down, which really makes no sense to me and becomes even greater of a concern to me if, in fact, we are going to be doing these extenders for a long time and not doing a complete budget year. But again, you can't ask me what's going to happen. This is one where I'm as engaged as could be, but not being a member of the majority, I can't tell you what their long-range plan is. And certainly, they haven't told us. As a matter of fact, I was probably never more surprised when I heard Carl Kruger, who is, and someone who I like talking to, but is the finance chairman for the majority, and we asked him questions on what was going on with budget negotiations. To say he was flippant would be kind. He said they were ongoing, people were there, and that's all we needed to know, basically. Don't ask me any more questions. Those aren't bad answers to Joe Robach, John DeFrancisco, or upstate senators. Those are bad answers for all the people of New York when you have that responsibility. And to not even say what the progress is, what's been agreed on up to this point, why you won't go to public meetings and conference committees, quite frankly, is very, very surprising to me, given the political climate, that they would take that risk, but even more importantly, that they wouldn't want to share where they're at and what they're doing. That can only make you scratch your head and have great concern.
Senator Robach, before we leave the budget extenders, you mentioned the fact that very often these amendments have involved capital projects and road construction. Aren't these kind of projects very timely? They can't be done in the winter. They can't be done in the fall.
Right. Well, certainly for roads, you have to use the weather in upstate New York and around the Rochester area. So yes, timeliness does become an issue. And another one that I would just throw out there too is one of the things that's been even diminished is aid to school districts in the extenders. And we all know we have to tighten our belt. And actually, while much of the governor's antics I haven't agreed with, some things I'm trying to be more responsible I've agreed with. But when they're not giving school districts a full number, but diminishing payment, that obviously causes them great concern. We've put an amendment forward which would allow them to tap into their employee benefit accrued liability reserve fund to help them so they can not only continue school activity, but also with the hope that they won't have to go to the property taxpayer to fill that in, which I know, again, in Rochester, in every part of my district, in the city of Rochester, in Brighton, Greece, Hilton, in every part of my district, property taxes are on everybody's mind. So we thought this was a good thing. And I want to read this because I want people to know how important this is. We tapped into this money, and the comptroller of the state of New York, a Democrat from the other side of the aisle, points out that this money really has been what do you want to say? More money has been put in the pool than's been needed, and they estimate that there's probably over $407 million in overage payment in these funds that could be used and applied today if this amendment or a change in the law was made. So out of conscientiousness, not only to school boards, school districts, our students, but also for the property taxpayers of New York, working along with the comptroller of our state, we're trying to say, set these funds free rather than have to create new ones or get it somewhere else. I thought that made all the sense in the world. And yet again, while we're all trying to look for ways to get through this period, we don't know how long that will be. That's up to the leadership of our respected and collective houses. All my colleagues seem to think it's a good idea. Yet again, this goes down in party line vote, which is hard. So when people contact me and say they like these ideas and why aren't they passing, what's the holdup, I can only point to the actions, again, of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and many of my New York City colleagues who seem to at least lightly say they're for these things, but don't follow up with the action that should follow suit to help us make it happen. So it makes budget forecasting and some of the activities hard to figure. Though I will say this, the public is connecting the dots and putting it together as to who's doing what and who's not doing what.
I know that many of our viewers have contacted us in support of, in effect, a budget cap.
Yeah.
Because there's an issue, there's a real concern that New York State spends too much, and that's why we keep seeing increases in our taxes. Where do you stand on capping our budget?
There's two caps. One on school taxes. That's one that we've addressed also in amendments. And I've been more associated in driving and sponsor the bill to cap overall spending in the state budget, which I think needs to happen to put some realistic parameters at these challenging times, making us tighten our belt, just like businesses, working men and women, people on a fixed income, and young families. And so hopefully we'll get there as well.
Senator, I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll be following up with you in the future.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon.